Hi, it's Dr. Bob, and today we are at White Sands National Monument near White Sands, New Mexico. An amazing place. I'm wearing sunglasses today because this sand is so white that it'll blind you. It's not like the sand you would see at a typical beach because unlike the typical beach, which would have quartz sand, this is all gypsum. How did this get here? In the middle of the desert, we have these incredible white dunes, all of this beautiful white gypsum. It sparkles and it's soft and just amazing, amazing thing. Well, during the flood, we would have had the fountains of the deep opening up, and not only did they spew forth, these fountains of the deep spew forth quartz-rich water, which was then precipitated out of the water and formed the quartz sand that we see, but we also would have had some amazing reactions happening that create things like salt and create things like this gypsum. If you have, and they've discovered in doing the laboratory work in trying to understand the formation of gypsum, that an aqueous solution, so that means a solution in water that contains calcium chloride and sodium sulfate, when those two chemicals, or those two chemicals are brought together, those two compounds are brought together in an aqueous solution in the right set of circumstances, they will then start to begin the development of gypsum, these crystals that form gypsum. Now it's interesting because then what you end up with is gypsum just like we see in wallboard in your homes and things like that. But this gypsum then is typically it forms into these sheets or into a very crystalline structure. So then as you have these amazing deposits of gypsum building up and then capped with additional sediments that come through the process of the flood, as you see these then eroded away and the gypsum itself is exposed, then the weathering process can happen and we have these amazing gypsum sands that form here in White Sands. Now it's also interesting that this substance, that when it gets wet, it actually begins to form almost like concrete. So you'll see plants that grow here in these dunes, and the reason they're able to grow is because those plants will then collect water, and around the roots of these plants that moisture will collect, and gypsum then is cemented together. And so in essence, these plants cement themselves in place. So they then tie themselves to the landscape. So in spite of the amazing winds that come through this area, those plants are able to remain. Also, when it occasionally does rain, these dunes then will turn into a hard surface. And then it is again those winds that begin to work on them, loosen up the surface, and create this amazing white sand. As we look at this amazing gypsum sand, it also answers another question that we've had as we have toured caverns in the area. Not too far away is Carlsbad Caverns near Carlsbad, New Mexico. And as we discussed there, that cavern was formed in hydrothermal processes. And what a hydrothermal process involves is, one, again, water, but also natural gas coming up through fractures in the limestone, which then mixes with sulfur in the environment there to form sulfuric acid. And the question is, where do we get the sulfur? Gypsum is composed largely of sulfur. So it's calcium and sulfur. Calcium chloride, sodium sulfate are what go into making gypsum. So we have here in this area, not too far from Carlsbad Caverns, the solution to our question of where does the sulfur come from in Carlsbad Caverns and other caverns that are formed through this hydrothermal process. In Carlsbad, you actually will see blocks of gypsum that still remain at the base of this amazing cavern. So in addition to answering the events of the flood, this also helps us to understand better the formation of these caverns in the period after the flood. So an answer to our sulfur question right here in White Sands. It is another great example that the events of the flood are represented in the geography and the geology that we see all around us. One more example that it's okay to believe. So right here with Dr. Bob at White Sands National Monument in White Sands, New Mexico.